The scene opens with Ethan Carter stepping out of his sleek black luxury car, its polished surface gleaming under the late afternoon sun. He pauses for a moment, adjusting his tailored suit jacket, a garment that screams success, but feels oddly foreign here amidst the modest houses and weathered sidewalks of his hometown. His eyes scan the familiar yet strangely distant landscape. The cracked pavement where he once played basketball as a teenager, the old diner on the corner where he used to meet friends after school, and the towering oak tree whose branches still stretch toward the sky like welcoming arms. But there's something heavier in his gaze now, something unspoken. It's not just nostalgia, it's regret. Ethan exhales deeply, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. For 6 years, he had convinced himself that leaving this place behind was the right decision. After all, wasn't it every man's dream to escape the monotony of small-town life? To chase ambition, wealth, and power until you could finally call yourself successful? That's exactly what Ethan did. He left everything behind: the factory job, the tiny rented apartment, the endless arguments about money, and built an empire from scratch. Yet standing here now, surrounded by memories he can't outrun, he realizes how hollow that victory feels. Success didn't fill the void, it only widened it. As Ethan walks slowly down the street, his polished leather shoes clicking against the uneven sidewalk, we're drawn into his mind through a series of fragmented flashbacks. These aren't linear or neatly organized. They're raw, emotional snapshots that piece together who Ethan used to be before the fame and fortune consumed him. We see him working long hours at the local factory, his hands calloused and stained with grease, his face etched with exhaustion. We hear his voice trembling during heated arguments with Sophia, his wife at the time, over bills they couldn't pay and dreams they couldn't afford. "You're always chasing something bigger," she would say, her tone laced with frustration. "But what happens when you finally catch it? Will it even matter?" These memories are interrupted by the sound of laughter drifting from a nearby park. Children run past Ethan, their carefree shouts echoing off the buildings around him. He watches them for a moment, his expression softening. There's a flicker of longing in his eyes, though he quickly masks it with a practiced stoicism. This isn't why he came back, not entirely. Or is it? Ethan continues walking until he reaches the edge of town, where the houses grow smaller and more worn. Here, he encounters someone he hasn't seen in years, Mr. Henderson, the elderly owner of the hardware store where Ethan occasionally worked odd jobs during high school. The old man leans against the counter outside his shop, squinting against the sunlight as he recognizes the figure approaching him. "Well, I'll be damned," Mr. Henderson says, his gravelly voice tinged with disbelief. "Is that really you, Ethan Carter?" "It's me, Mr. H," Ethan replies, forcing a smile. "Long time no see." "Long time indeed," the older man mutters, shaking his head. "Heard you made quite the name for yourself out there. Big. City lights, fancy cars, all that jazz. Never thought I'd live to see the day." There's a note of admiration in Mr. Henderson's words, but also a subtle undertone of judgment. Ethan shifts uncomfortably, sensing it. "Yeah, well, things change," he says vaguely, glancing away. "How have you been holding up?" "Oh, same old, Mr. Henderson shrugs. "Still fixing leaky pipes and selling nails to folks who don't know how to hammer 'em straight. But enough about me. What brings you back to this godforsaken town? Surely not for the scenery." Ethan hesitates, unsure how much to reveal. "Just needed to clear my head, I guess," he says finally. "Thought coming home might help." Mr. Henderson studies him for a moment, his sharp eyes missing nothing. Well, if you're looking for peace, you picked the wrong place. This town's got a way of stirring up trouble, even for those who think they've left it behind before." Ethan can respond. The conversation is interrupted by the distant sound of footsteps. Both men turn to see a woman walking briskly down the street, her arms laden with grocery bags. She looks up briefly, catching sight of Ethan, and freezes mid-step. Her expression is unreadable, but there's no mistaking the shock in her wide eyes. It's Sophia. For a split second, time seems to stand still. Ethan's breath catches in his throat as he takes in her appearance. She's older now, of course, her once youthful features softened by age and experience, but she's still beautiful in a way that makes his chest tighten. Her dark hair is tied back loosely, and she wears simple clothes that speak of practicality rather than vanity. Beside her, clutching her hand tightly, is a young boy. He can't be more than 6 or 7 years old, with curly brown hair and bright, curious eyes. The resemblance is unmistakable. Ethan feels the ground shift beneath his feet. Who is this child? Why does he look so much like him? Before he can process the implications, Sophia turns abruptly and hurries away, pulling the boy along with her. Ethan stares after them, his mind racing with questions he doesn't yet have answers to. "Looks like you've got some catching up to do," Mr. Henderson remarks dryly, breaking the silence. "What do you mean?" Ethan asks sharply, tearing his gaze away from Sophia's retreating figure. The old man gives him a knowing look. "Let's just say your absence hasn't gone unnoticed around here. People talk, Ethan. They always do." With that cryptic comment lingering in the air, Mr. Henderson shuffles back inside his store, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. He stands there for several minutes, staring blankly at the empty street ahead. The weight of unresolved emotions presses down on him, heavier than ever before. Whatever brought him back to this town, he knows now that it wasn't coincidence. Something or someone is waiting for him here, demanding closure. Ethan remains rooted to the spot for a moment. Longer, his mind swirling with questions he doesn't yet have the courage to ask. Who is that boy? Why does Sophia look so different, so distant? And why does it feel like the entire town knows something he doesn't? These thoughts gnaw at him as he finally forces himself to move forward, his steps slow and deliberate. Each step feels heavier than the last, as though the weight of 6 years' worth of absence is pressing down on him all at once. As he walks further into the heart of the town, the streets become busier. People mill about, going about their daily routines, shopping, chatting, laughing. To an outsider, it might seem like nothing has changed here, but Ethan notices the subtle shifts immediately. The bakery on the corner, once owned by Mrs. Delaney, is now a laundromat. The old movie theater where he and Sophia used to sneak in during high school stands boarded up and abandoned. Even the air smells different, tinged with the faint scent of industrial cleaners from the new factory that's replaced the one he used to work at. It's a reminder that time hasn't stood still here, not for anyone. Ethan's first stop is the local diner, a place that holds countless memories for him. He pushes open the glass door, the familiar jingle of the bell above it, stirring something deep within him. Inside, the decor is largely unchanged. Cracked vinyl booths, faded posters advertising long-forgotten specials, and the same jukebox in the corner that hasn't worked in years. A few patrons glance up as he enters, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Word travels fast in small towns, and it's clear that news of his return has already spread. He takes a seat at the counter, ordering a cup of coffee without really wanting it. The waitress, a middle-aged woman named Linda, whom he vaguely remembers from high school, gives him a polite but guarded smile. "Welcome back, Ethan," she says, her tone neutral. "It's been a while." "Yeah, it has," Ethan replies, forcing another smile. "Things change, you know." Linda nods, though her eyes narrow slightly. "Some things more than others." Her words hang in the air, heavy with implication. Ethan opens his mouth to respond but thinks better of it. Instead, he sips his coffee, letting the bitter liquid burn its way down his throat. He's not sure what he expected coming back here. Hero's welcome, forgiveness? Whatever it was, this isn't it. The town feels both familiar and alien, like a song he used to love but can no longer remember the lyrics to. While he sits there, trying to gather his thoughts, an older man slides onto the stool beside him. It's Tom Reynolds, a former co-worker from the factory who always had a knack for knowing everyone's business. Tom greets Ethan with a nod, his weathered face breaking into a grin. "Well, if it ain't Ethan Carter, heard you hit the big time out there? Living the dream, huh?" Ethan chuckles nervously, unsure how to respond. "Something like that." Tom leans closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "So, what brings you back to this dump after all these years? Business? Family? Or just feeling nostalgic?" The question catches Ethan off guard. He hesitates, searching for an answer that won't sound hollow. "I guess I just needed to reconnect," he says finally. "See where I came from, you know?" Tom raises an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "Reconnect, huh? That's funny, 'cause word around town is you've got some unfinished business with Sophia. At the mention of her name, Ethan stiffens. His grip tightens around the coffee mug, his knuckles turning white. "What do you mean?" he asks, his voice sharper than intended. Tom shrugs, feigning innocence. "Just saying. People talk. She's done well for herself, considering everything. Got that flower shop up and running, raising that kid of hers." He trails off, watching Ethan closely for a reaction. Ethan's stomach churns. "Kid?" he repeats, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah, cute little guy. Looks just like her, or maybe someone else, if you catch my drift." Tom winks knowingly before sliding off the stool and heading toward the exit. "Good luck with that, Ethan. You're gonna need it." The comment leaves Ethan reeling. He stares blankly at the countertop, his mind racing. Could it be possible? Is that boy, Liam, wasn't it? His son? The thought sends a wave of conflicting emotions crashing over him. Guilt, anger, hope, fear. How could Sophia keep something like this from him? And why? Before he can dwell on it too long, another figure approaches him. Sarah Bennett, a childhood friend who always had a soft spot for Ethan. Now in her mid-30s, she looks older, but still carries the same warmth in her eyes. "Ethan," she says softly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "I heard you were back. Thought I'd come say hi." "Sarah," Ethan replies, managing a genuine smile this time. "It's good to see you." "You too," she says, sliding onto the stool next to him. "How have you been holding up? Must be strange being back here after so long." "Is," Ethan admits. "Everything feels different, like I don't belong anymore." Sarah nods sympathetically. "That's understandable. You left under tough circumstances. People haven't forgotten that." Ethan sighs, rubbing his temples. "I didn't come back to stir up trouble, Sarah. I just needed closure, I guess." "Well, if anyone can understand that, it's me," Sarah says gently. "But fair warning, Sophia's not the same person she was when you left. She's stronger now, more independent, and that boy of hers, he means everything to her." Ethan swallows hard, the weight of her words settling heavily on his shoulders. "Do you think she'd even want to talk to me?" "That's not for me to say," Sarah replies. "But if I were you, I'd tread carefully. She's been through a lot, Ethan. Losing you, raising that kid on her own, it hasn't been easy." The conversation leaves Ethan feeling more conflicted than ever. As Sarah excuses herself and heads out of the diner, he finds himself staring out the window, watching the world go by. The boy's face keeps flashing in his mind, those bright, curious eyes haunting him. Could it really be his son? If so, what kind of father abandons his child for 6 years without even knowing they exist? Determined to find answers, Ethan decides to visit Sophia's flower shop. It's located on the outskirts of town, nestled between a hardware store and a vacant lot. As he approaches, he notices the sign hanging above the door, "Blossom and Bloom." The name suits her, he thinks bitterly, always finding beauty in broken things. Through the window, he sees her arranging bouquets, her movements precise and graceful. She looks peaceful, content even. For a brief moment, Ethan considers walking away, leaving things as they are. But then he remembers the boy again, their resemblance undeniable, and knows he can't turn back now, not until he knows the truth. Ethan stands outside Blossom and Bloom, his heart pounding in his chest like a drumbeat he can't silence. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows across the storefront, softening the edges of the world, but doing nothing to ease the tension gripping him. He takes a deep breath, inhaling the faint scent of fresh flowers wafting through the open door. It's a comforting aroma, one that reminds him of happier times, of mornings spent lying in bed with Sophia while she arranged bouquets for weddings and anniversaries, her laughter mingling with the rustle of petals. But those memories feel distant now, almost like they belong to someone else. He hesitates at the threshold, his hand hovering near the door handle. What will he say to her? How does one begin a conversation after 6 years of silence? His mind races with possibilities, each one more awkward than the last. Should he apologize? Demand answers? Pretend everything is fine? None of it feels right. And yet, standing here isn't an option either. The boy, their possible son, is waiting just beyond this door, and Ethan knows he owes it to both of them to confront the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Summoning what little courage he has left, Ethan pushes the door open. A bell above it jingles softly, announcing his presence. Inside, the air is cool and fragrant, filled with the mingling scents of roses, lilies, and lavender. Rows of vibrant blooms line the walls, their colors so vivid they seem almost unreal. In the center of the room, Sophia stands behind the counter, her back to him as she carefully arranges a bouquet of sunflowers. She doesn't turn around immediately, perhaps assuming it's just another customer. For a moment, Ethan simply watches her, drinking in the sight of her. She looks different, not just older, but stronger. There's a quiet confidence in the way she moves, a sense of purpose that wasn't there before. Her hands work deftly, trimming stems and arranging leaves with practiced precision. It's clear she's poured herself into this business, turning it into something beautiful, despite the challenges life has thrown her way. Ethan feels a pang of guilt twist in his gut. This woman, who once depended on him, has built a life without him and done it remarkably well. Finally, sensing his presence, Sophia turns around. When her eyes meet his, there's a flicker of surprise, quickly masked by a steely composure. "Ethan," she says flatly, her voice devoid of warmth, "what are you doing here?" Her tone stings more than he expects. For all the scenarios he imagined during the drive into town, none prepared him for the coldness in her gaze. Still, he forces himself to speak. I came back to see how you were doing," he says, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. Sophia raises an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "After 6 years, that's awfully generous of you." "I know it's been a long time," Ethan begins, taking a tentative step closer. "But I wanted to..." "To what?" She cuts him off sharply. "Make amends, check a box on your conscience, or maybe just satisfy your curiosity about what you left behind." Her words hit like a punch to the gut, leaving Ethan momentarily speechless. He hadn't anticipated such hostility, though perhaps he should have. After all, he abandoned her when she needed him most. "Sophia, please," he says finally, his voice tinged with desperation. "I didn't come here to fight. I need to understand." "Understand what?" she demands, crossing her arms over her chest. "That you made your choice 6 years ago? That you walked away from us without looking back?" The accusation hangs in the air between them, sharp and unyielding. Ethan flinches, the weight of her words pressing down on him. "I didn't walk away from you," he protests weakly. I thought I was giving you a better life, one where you wouldn't have to struggle anymore." Sophia lets out a bitter laugh, shaking her head. "You really don't get it, do you? Money doesn't fix everything, Ethan. Not loneliness, not heartbreak, and certainly not the emptiness of raising a child alone because their father decided his dreams were more important." At the mention of the child, Ethan's throat tightens. "Is he mine?" he asks quietly, his voice trembling. Sophia freezes, her expression unreadable. For a moment she doesn't respond, as if weighing whether or not to answer honestly. Then, with a sigh, she nods. "Yes, Liam is your son, but don't think for a second that gives you any claim over him or me." The confirmation hits Ethan like a freight train, knocking the wind out of him. He staggers backward, leaning against the counter for support. His mind races, replaying every missed opportunity, every birthday and milestone he wasn't there for. Guilt and regret crash over him in waves, threatening to pull him under. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispers hoarsely. "Would it have mattered?" Sophia counters, her voice rising slightly. "You were too busy chasing your dream to even pick up the phone, Ethan. Did you really expect me to track you down and ruin your perfect new life?" Her words sting, but they're not entirely unfair. Ethan knows she's right. He had been selfish, consumed by ambition, and blind to the consequences of his actions. But hearing it spoken aloud makes it impossible to ignore. "I'm sorry," he says, his voice breaking. "I never meant to hurt you or him. I swear, if I'd known..." "But you didn't know," Sophia interrupts, her tone softening ever so slightly. "And now you're here, expecting forgiveness, or worse, gratitude, for showing up 6 years too late." Ethan opens his mouth to respond, but no words come out. What can he say? She's right. He doesn't deserve forgiveness, not yet. All he can do is stand there, overwhelmed by the enormity of what he's lost. The tension between them is palpable, filling the small space with an almost suffocating intensity. Finally, Sophia exhales deeply, running a hand through her hair. "Look, Ethan," she says, her voice calmer now but still firm. "I don't know why you're really here, and frankly, I don't care. But if you're serious about making things right, you're going to have to earn it, starting with staying out of my life until you figure out exactly what that means." With that, she turns back to her work, effectively dismissing him. Ethan stands there for a moment longer, unsure whether to argue or accept her terms. In the end, he chooses the latter, knowing she's given him more than he deserves already. Without another word, he turns and walks out of the shop, the bell above the door jingling softly behind him. As he steps back onto the street, the weight of the encounter settles heavily on his shoulders. The boy, Liam, is his son, his flesh and blood, and yet, in many ways, he's a stranger. Ethan realizes now that coming back to town wasn't just about reconnecting with his past. It was about reclaiming a part of himself he didn't even realize he'd lost. But reclaiming it won't be easy. Not with Sophia standing guard, determined to protect the life she's built without him. For the first time in years, Ethan feels truly lost. The road ahead is uncertain, fraught with challenges he's only beginning to comprehend. Yet, as he walks away from the flower shop, one thing becomes painfully clear. He can't leave again, not this time. Whatever it takes, he's going to fight for his family, even if it means starting from scratch. As Ethan walks away from Blossom and Bloom, his mind a whirlwind of guilt, regret, and determination, the camera, so to speak, lingers for a moment on Sophia. She stands motionless behind the counter, her hands resting lightly on the edge of the wooden surface, as if bracing herself against an invisible storm. Her face betrays nothing, but her eyes tell a different story. They shimmer faintly, with unshed tears, though she refuses to let them fall. This isn't weakness, it's resilience. Years of hardship have taught her how to compartmentalize her emotions, tucking them away until she has time to process them later. Alone. For a brief moment, she closes her eyes, taking a steadying breath. The encounter with Ethan was inevitable. She knows that now. Small towns are notorious for their gossip mills, and word of his return likely spread faster than wildfire. Still, she hadn't expected him to show up at her shop so soon, or for the confrontation to leave her feeling this raw. 6 years ago, when he walked out of her life without looking back, she promised herself she wouldn't let him hurt her. Again, yet here she is, standing in the aftermath of their meeting, feeling like the ground beneath her feet has shifted ever so slightly. Sophia shakes her head as if trying to shake loose the memories threatening to resurface. She can't afford to dwell on the past, not now, not ever. There's too much at stake. Turning back to the bouquet she was arranging before Ethan arrived, she resumes her work with renewed focus. Each stem she trims, each leaf she adjusts, becomes a form of meditation, a way to ground herself in the present and push aside the turmoil brewing inside her. But even as her hands move methodically, her mind drifts. Unbidden, flashes of the past flood her thoughts, pulling her back to the days when Ethan was still part of her life. Back then, they were young and idealistic, full of dreams that seemed within reach if only they worked hard enough. They rented a tiny apartment above Mr. Henderson's hardware store, scraping by on meager paychecks while dreaming of something better. Ethan worked long hours at the factory, coming home exhausted, but always eager to talk about his plans for the future. One day, he used to say, his voice filled with conviction, we'll have everything we've ever wanted, a house, a family, freedom from all this struggle. At first, Sophia believed him. How could she not? Ethan had a way of making the impossible seem achievable, his optimism infectious. But as the months turned into years, reality began to chip away at those dreams. The bills piled up, the arguments grew louder, and the gap between them widened with each passing day. When Ethan finally left, it wasn't just because he wanted more for himself. It was because he couldn't bear to face the life they'd built together anymore. And when he did leave, he took a piece of her with him, or so she thought. What Ethan doesn't know, and what Sophia has kept hidden all these years, is that the night before he disappeared from her life forever, she discovered something that would change everything. She was pregnant. At first, panic set in. How could she possibly raise a child on her own? The factory job barely covered rent, let alone diapers and formula. But as the initial shock wore off, a strange sense of clarity washed over her. If Ethan wasn't going to stick around. Then she would have to be strong enough for both of them. For Liam, the decision to keep the pregnancy a secret from Ethan wasn't made lightly. In fact, she wrestled with it for weeks, torn between telling him the truth and protecting herself and her unborn child from further heartache. Ultimately, pride won out. She convinced herself that Ethan had already made his choice by leaving, and that dragging him back into her life wouldn't solve anything. Besides, what kind of father could he be if he couldn't even stay? Raising Liam alone hasn't been easy. There were nights when she cried herself to sleep, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility. Days when she questioned whether she was doing enough, being enough. But through it all, she's managed to build a life for them, a modest but fulfilling existence centered around love, hard work, and perseverance. The flower shop, which she opened 3 years ago, became her sanctuary. It's more than just a business. It's a testament to her strength, a reminder that beauty can bloom even in the harshest conditions. Now, as she finishes arranging the bouquet of sunflowers, her thoughts turn to Liam. He's the reason she gets up every morning, the light that guides her through even the darkest moments. At 6 years old, he's curious, intelligent, and fiercely independent, traits she recognizes as reflections of both herself and Ethan. Sometimes, when he smiles or tilts his head just so, she sees glimpses of the man who broke her heart. Those moments are bittersweet, stirring up emotions she'd rather leave buried. Speaking of Liam, she glances at the clock on the wall. It's almost time for him to get out of school. She promised she'd pick him up today, and she never breaks promises. Not to him. Grabbing her bag from beneath the counter, she locks up the shop and heads toward her car, a reliable but aging sedan that's seen better days. As she drives to the elementary school, her mind continues to churn, replaying the conversation with Ethan over and over again. What does he want? Does he really think he can waltz back into their lives after all this time and expect forgiveness? And most importantly, what will she do if he tries to insert himself into Liam's world? When she arrives at the school, she parks near the entrance and waits patiently, watching as children spill out onto the playground. It doesn't take long for Liam to spot her. His curly brown hair bounces as he runs toward the car, his backpack swinging wildly behind him. "Hi, Mom," he calls excitedly, climbing into the passenger seat. "Guess what happened today?" Sophia forces a smile, pushing aside her lingering unease. "What happened, sweetheart?" "We got to plant seeds in science class," Liam exclaims, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. "Miss Carter said they might grow into flowers someday. Isn't that cool?" Sophia nods, her heart swelling with pride. "That's amazing, Liam. Maybe you'll have your own garden one day." "Yeah," he agrees eagerly. Then, noticing her distracted expression, he frowns. "Are you okay, Mom? You look sad." Her breath catches in her throat. Of course he notices. Liam has always been perceptive, picking up on her moods even when she tries to hide them. "I'm fine, baby," she assures him, reaching over to ruffle his hair affectionately. "Just thinking about grown-up stuff." Liam accepts her answer without question, turning his attention back to the window as they drive home. But Sophia can't shake the feeling that her carefully constructed world is beginning to unravel. Ethan's sudden reappearance has thrown everything into chaos, forcing her to confront questions she'd rather avoid. Can she trust him? Should she let him into Liam's life? And perhaps most daunting of all, what happens if she says no, but Liam finds out the truth anyway? By the time they arrive home, Sophia feels emotionally drained. She helps Liam with his homework, cooks dinner, and tucks him into bed, all while wearing a mask of normalcy. Only when the house falls silent does she allow herself to collapse onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. The weight of her decisions presses down on her. Heavier than ever before, she knows she can't keep Ethan at arm's length forever, not if he's serious about reconnecting. But letting him in means risking everything she's worked so hard to protect. And yet, deep down, a small part of her wonders if maybe, just maybe, this could be an opportunity for healing. Not just for Ethan, but for her and Liam, too. The silence of the house envelops Sophia as she sits alone on the couch, the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen providing the only background noise. It's a quiet she's grown accustomed to over the years, a quiet that once felt suffocating, but has since become a kind of armor, shielding her from the chaos of the outside world. Tonight, however, the stillness feels heavier than usual, pressing down on her chest like an invisible weight. Her mind refuses to rest, replaying fragments of her encounter with Ethan over and over again, each memory sharper and more painful than the last. She leans forward, resting her elbows on her knees and cradling her head in her hands. For the first time in years, she allows herself to truly feel the anger, the hurt, the betrayal that she's buried so deeply within her. These emotions aren't new. They've been simmering beneath the surface for 6 long years, but now they're boiling over, threatening to spill out in ways she can no longer control. Why now? She whispers aloud, her voice trembling. Why does he think he gets to come back after all this time? But even as she asks the question, part of her already knows the answer. Ethan isn't just here because of nostalgia or guilt. He's here because of Liam. That much was clear from the moment he walked into her shop. His eyes had betrayed him, darting toward the photographs on the wall behind the counter, searching for any sign of the boy who looked so much like him. Sophia had seen the flicker of recognition in his gaze, followed by the unmistakable flash of shock. In that instant, she knew he'd figured it out, or at least suspected. And now, whether she likes it or not, he's determined to claim what he believes is his. The thought makes her stomach churn. She doesn't want to admit it, but a small, traitorous part of her understands why he's doing this. If their roles were reversed, if she had left and discovered years later that he'd raised their child alone, wouldn't she feel the same way? Wouldn't she want answers, closure, a chance to make things right? But understanding doesn't mean forgiving. Not yet. Not when the wounds are still so fresh. Sophia rises from the couch and walks to the window, pulling back the curtains slightly to peer outside. The street is dark and empty, the houses lining it silent, except for the occasional flicker of light from a television screen. This town has always been predictable, its rhythm steady and unchanging. People live their lives quietly, content to let the days pass without too much fuss. Yet tonight, Sophia feels like an outsider looking in, disconnected from the simplicity she once cherished. Her gaze drifts to the photograph sitting on the windowsill, a candid shot of her and Liam taken last summer during one of their rare trips to the lake. They're both smiling, their faces sun-kissed and carefree. Liam holds an ice cream cone in one hand, his other arm wrapped tightly around her waist. It's a perfect moment, frozen in time, and it reminds Sophia of everything she's fought so hard to protect. Her son is her world, her reason for waking up every morning, and the idea of anyone disrupting that, even Ethan, fills her with dread. Yet, as much as she wants to shut him out completely, she knows it won't be that simple. Ethan isn't the type to give up easily, especially not when something or someone he cares about is involved. And Liam deserves to know the truth eventually, doesn't he? Sophia exhales sharply, releasing the curtain and turning away from the window. She moves to the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water in an attempt to calm her racing thoughts. As she sips it slowly, her mind drifts to the early days of motherhood, the sleepless nights, the endless diaper changes, the overwhelming sense of responsibility that came with raising a child on her own. There were moments when she doubted herself, when she wondered if she was strong enough to handle it all. But through sheer determination and a lot of help from Sarah, who became her rock during those difficult first months, she managed to pull through. One of the hardest parts, though, was dealing with the judgment of others. Small towns thrive on gossip, and Sophia quickly learned that being a single mother carried its own stigma. Whispers followed her wherever she went, speculating about the identity of Liam's father and why he wasn't around. Some people pitied her, others judged her harshly, assuming the worst. But Sophia refused to let their opinions define her. Instead, she poured all her energy into building a better life for herself and her son, channeling her pain into purpose. Opening the flower shop was a turning point. At first, it was just a hobby, a way to occupy her mind and make ends meet. But as word spread about her talent for arranging bouquets, the business grew, eventually becoming her primary source of income. More importantly, it gave her a sense of accomplishment, a reminder that she was capable of creating beauty even in the midst of hardship. Over time, Blossom and Bloom became more than just a store. It became a symbol of her resilience, a testament to the fact that she could thrive despite the odds stacked against her. Now, standing in her kitchen, Sophia wonders if that resilience will be enough to withstand whatever storm Ethan's return might bring. She knows she can't keep him away indefinitely, not if he's serious about reconnecting with Liam, but letting him in means risking everything she's worked so hard to build. What if he tries to take Liam away from her? What if he disrupts the delicate balance she's created for their family? The possibilities swirl in her mind like a tempest, leaving her feeling powerless and uncertain. And then there's Liam himself. He's such a bright, curious child, always asking questions and seeking answers. Sooner or later, he's going to start wondering about his father. What will Sophia tell him when that day comes? Will she lie to protect him, or will she finally reveal the truth? Either choice carries consequences, and neither feels entirely right. As these thoughts consume her, Sophia finds herself staring at the clock on the wall. It's late, too late to dwell on such heavy matters. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges, and she needs to be ready. With a weary sigh, she places the empty glass in the sink and heads to bed, resolving to face whatever comes next with the same strength and determination that have carried her this far. Meanwhile, across town, Ethan lies awake in his hotel room, staring at the ceiling as the events of the day replay in his mind. His conversation with Sophia haunts him, her words cutting deeper with each passing hour. "You made your choice," she had said, her tone laced with bitterness. "Don't think for a second that gives you any claim over him or me. He knows she's right, of course. He did leave. He chose ambition over family, chasing dreams that ultimately left him feeling hollow. But knowing he was wrong doesn't make the guilt any easier to bear. Every missed birthday, every milestone he wasn't there for, it all weighs on him like a mountain, crushing him under its enormity. Yet amidst the guilt, there's also hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he can fix what he broke. Hope that he can earn Sophia's trust again, not as a husband, but as a father. Because no matter how angry she is, no matter how justified her resentment may be, one thing is certain. Liam is his son, his flesh and blood. And nothing, not distance, not time, not even Sophia's resistance, can change that. Determined to prove himself, Ethan begins formulating a plan. He knows he can't force his way into their lives. Sophia made that abundantly clear, but perhaps he can find other ways to connect, to show her and Liam that he's serious about being present. Maybe volunteering at the local community center, where Liam sometimes attends after-school programs, or sponsoring events at Sophia's flower shop, subtly supporting her business without making it seem like charity. Little gestures done consistently and sincerely might eventually open the door to something more meaningful. The next morning, Ethan wakes early, unable to shake the image of Liam from his mind. The boy's curly brown hair, his bright, curious eyes, they're unmistakably his. Yet there's also something uniquely Sophia in him, a warmth and kindness that reminds Ethan of the woman he fell in love with all those years ago. The realization fills him with a mixture of awe and sorrow. How could he have missed out on 6 years of his son's life? How could he have let pride and ambition blind him to what truly mattered? With renewed resolve, Ethan dresses and heads out into the crisp morning air. His first stop is the diner, where he orders breakfast and strikes up conversations with locals, asking casual questions about Sophia and Liam. Most respond cautiously, wary of his intentions, but a few offer tidbits of information that paint a clearer picture of their lives. He learns that Liam is a popular kid at school, known for his quick wit and infectious laugh. He hears stories about Sophia's dedication to her business, her generosity toward customers, her unwavering commitment to her son. Each detail reinforces his admiration for her and his determination to be part of their world again. By midday, Ethan finds himself standing outside the elementary school, watching as children stream out onto the playground. He doesn't approach Liam directly, that would be too much, too soon, but simply observing him from afar brings a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, Ethan feels like he's exactly where he's meant to be. Over the next few days, Ethan continues his quiet campaign to insert himself into their orbit. He stops by the flower shop occasionally, always buying something small, a bouquet for his hotel room, a potted plant for his office desk. Each visit is brief, polite, and non-confrontational, designed to ease Sophia into accepting his presence rather than provoke another argument. Slowly but surely, her icy demeanor begins to thaw, though she remains guarded, watching him closely for any misstep. Liam, meanwhile, starts noticing the stranger who keeps showing up around town. One afternoon, as Ethan helps carry boxes into the community center for a charity event, Liam approaches him curiously. "Who are you?" he asks, tilting his head to one side. Ethan freezes, caught off guard by the directness of the question. For a moment he considers deflecting, offering some vague explanation, but then he remembers Sophia's warning. Honesty is key. "I'm a friend of your mom's," he says carefully, kneeling down to meet Liam's gaze. "My name's Ethan." Liam studies him for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You look familiar," he says finally. "Have we met before?" Ethan smiles faintly, his heart aching at the innocence of the question. "Not really," he replies, "but maybe someday we'll get to know each other better." Liam nods, seemingly satisfied with the answer, and runs off to join his friends. Ethan watches him go, a lump forming in his throat. Someday, he vows silently, no matter what it takes. The days that follow Ethan's quiet re-entry into their lives are tense, but charged with unspoken possibility. For Sophia, each interaction, no matter how small, feels like a test, a chance to gauge whether Ethan truly means what he says or if this is just another fleeting phase of guilt-driven obligation. She watches him carefully, scrutinizing his every move for signs of insincerity. So far, he's been nothing but respectful, keeping his distance while finding subtle ways to insert himself into their world. But trust isn't something she can give easily, not after everything she's endured. One afternoon, as Sophia tends to a display of fresh daisies in her shop, Ethan walks in carrying a large box labeled Community Center Supplies. He sets it down near the counter, brushing dust off his hands before offering her a hesitant smile. "Hey," he says softly, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "I was wondering if you'd let me help out here today. You've got deliveries coming in, right? Thought I could lend a hand." Sophia pauses, her fingers hovering over the petals of a flower. She studies him for a moment, searching his face for any hint of ulterior motive. When she finds none, she exhales slowly and nods. "Fine," she says curtly, returning to her work, "but don't get in my way." Ethan doesn't argue. Instead, he rolls up his sleeves and begins unpacking crates of flowers, organizing them neatly on the shelves. They work in silence at first, the only sounds the rustle of wrapping paper and the occasional clink of vases being rearranged. It's awkward, yes, but not entirely unpleasant. There is a rhythm to their movements, a shared understanding of efficiency that reminds Sophia of the early days of their marriage, when they used to tackle household chores together. Back then, they were a team, or at least they tried to be. After a while, Ethan breaks the silence. "You've done an incredible job with this place," he says, gesturing to the vibrant displays around them. "It's beautiful." Sophia glances at him briefly, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. "Thanks," she mutters, her voice guarded. "Took a lot of work." "I can see that," Ethan replies, nodding. "You always had a knack for making things come alive. Guess some things never change." His words hang in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sophia doesn't respond immediately, instead focusing on trimming the stems of a bouquet of roses. But inside, she feels a flicker of something she hasn't felt in years. Pride. Not because of Ethan's compliment, but because she knows it's true. This shop is hers, her creation, her sanctuary, and no matter what happens next, no one can take that away from her. As the afternoon wears on, the tension between them begins to ease ever so slightly. Ethan asks questions about the business, genuinely interested in how it operates. Sophia answers cautiously at first, but as the conversation progresses, she finds herself opening up more than she intended. She tells him about the challenges of running a small business in a town where people still prefer big box stores, about the joy of creating custom arrangements for weddings and funerals, about the satisfaction of seeing customers leave with smiles on their faces. Ethan listens intently, nodding along and occasionally offering insights from his own experiences in entrepreneurship. For a brief moment, it almost feels like old times. Almost. When the last delivery is unpacked and the shop is tidy once again, Sophia steps back to survey their work. "Thanks for the help," she says finally, her tone softer than before. "I appreciate it." "You're welcome," Ethan replies, meeting her gaze steadily. "If you ever need another pair of hands, just say the word." Sophia hesitates, unsure how to respond. Part of her wants to dismiss his offer outright, to remind him that he gave up the right to be part of her life 6 years ago. But another part, the part that's been quietly observing his efforts these past few days, wonders if maybe, just maybe, he's sincere. "We'll see," she says finally, turning away to avoid his eyes. Meanwhile, Liam continues to notice the stranger who keeps popping up around town. At first he thought little of it. Grown-ups often came and went without explanation, but now he's starting to piece things together. Ethan seems different from the other adults Liam knows. He's kind, patient, and oddly familiar, though Liam can't quite put his finger on why. One evening, as Sophia tucks him into bed, he decides to ask. "Mom?" he says sleepily, clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur. "Yeah, sweetheart," Sophia replies, smoothing his hair. "That man who helps you at the shop sometimes. Who is he?" Sophia freezes, her hand pausing mid-stroke. She knew this question would come eventually, but she wasn't prepared for it tonight. Taking a deep breath, she forces a calm smile. "His name's Ethan," she says gently. "He's an old friend." "Why does he look like me?" Liam presses, his brow furrowing. The question catches Sophia off guard. Of course Liam would notice. They share the same curly hair, the same dimpled smile, the same curious tilt of the head. How could she have thought he wouldn't? For a moment she considers deflecting, telling him it's just a coincidence. But lying to him feels wrong, especially when the truth is so close to the surface. Sophia begins, her voice trembling slightly. "He's someone I used to know a long time ago, before you were born." Liam frowns, clearly unsatisfied with the vague answer. "Is he my dad?" The question hits Sophia like a punch to the gut. She sits down on the edge of the bed, her heart pounding. This is it, the moment she's been dreading. She could lie, tell him no, brush it off as childish imagination, but looking into her son's wide, trusting eyes, she realizes she can't. Not anymore. "Yes," she admits finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's your dad." Liam stares at her, processing the revelation. "Why didn't you tell me?" Tears well up in Sophia's eyes, but she blinks them away quickly. "Because I wasn't sure if he deserved to be part of our lives," she says honestly, "and because I wanted to protect you." "From what?" Liam asks, his voice tinged with confusion. "From getting hurt," Sophia replies, brushing a stray tear from her cheek. "Your dad left us a long time ago, Liam. He made choices that weren't easy to forgive, but lately, he's been trying to make things right. Whether or not he stays in our lives is something we'll figure out together, okay?" Liam nods slowly, still absorbing the information. "Can I meet him?" Sophia hesitates, torn between protecting her son and giving him the chance to know his father. Finally, she sighs. "Maybe someday," she says softly. "But only if you want to." Liam thinks for a moment, then nods again. "Okay." Satisfied for now, he snuggles deeper under the covers, closing his eyes. Sophia watches him for a moment longer, her mind racing with thoughts of what comes next. Telling Liam the truth has opened a door she can't close again, and she knows Ethan will want to step through it. The question is she ready to let him? The next day, Sophia arrives at the flower shop to find Ethan waiting outside, leaning against the wall with a cup of coffee in hand. When he sees her, he straightens up, his expression wary but hopeful. "We need to talk," she says, without preamble, unlocking the door and stepping inside. Ethan follows her, sensing the gravity of the situation. "What's going on?" Sophia takes a deep breath, steeling herself for what she's about to say. "Liam knows," she says simply. "He asked me last night if you're his father. I told him the truth." Ethan's eyes widen in shock, followed by a wave of emotions. Guilt, relief, fear, all flashing across his face in quick succession. "How did he react?" he asks, finally, his voice barely audible. "He handled it better than I expected," Sophia admits, "but he wants to meet you." Ethan swallows hard, the weight of the moment settling heavily on his shoulders. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" "No," Sophia replies bluntly, "but it's not my decision to make." If Liam wants to know you, I won't stand in his way. Just don't screw this up, Ethan. He's been through enough already. I won't, Ethan promises, his voice firm despite the tremor beneath it. I swear, Sophia, I'll do whatever it takes to prove myself to both of you. Sophia studies him for a long moment, searching for any sign of doubt. When she finds none, she nods reluctantly. All right, she says, but take it slow. He's still a kid, and this is a lot for him to process. I understand, Ethan replies, his gratitude evident in his tone. Thank you, Sophia, for trusting me, even a little. Sophia doesn't respond immediately, instead turning back to her work. But as Ethan begins helping her arrange bouquets, she allows herself a small, private smile. Maybe, just maybe, this fragile truce is the beginning of something new, something neither of them expected, but both desperately need. The fragile truce between Sophia and Ethan begins to take shape over the following weeks, though it remains delicate, like glass balanced precariously on the edge of a table. Ethan continues to help out at the flower shop whenever he can, always careful not to overstep or push too hard. His presence becomes a quiet constant in their lives, subtle enough that Liam grows accustomed to seeing him around without feeling overwhelmed. Yet beneath the surface, tensions simmer, waiting for the right moment to boil over. One Saturday afternoon, as Sophia prepares bouquets for an upcoming wedding, Ethan arrives with a bag of groceries, a gesture meant to be helpful, but one that immediately sets her on edge. What's this? She asks, eyeing the bag skeptically. It's just some stuff I picked up, Ethan explains, setting them on the counter. I figured you could use a break from cooking tonight. Sophia narrows her eyes, suspicion flickering across her face. I don't need you taking care of me, Ethan. That's not why you're here. I know, he says quickly, holding up his hands in defense. I wasn't trying to imply anything. I just wanted to do something nice. Her expression softens slightly, though her tone remains firm. You don't have to prove yourself by buying me things. If you want to earn my trust, show me you're serious about being part of Liam's life, not mine. Ethan nods, understanding the distinction. Fair enough, he says quietly. Their interactions are fraught with these kinds of exchanges, moments of progress followed by reminders of the past. Yet despite the tension, there's an undeniable shift happening. Slowly, Sophia begins to see glimpses of the man she once loved, the man who used to dream big and work tirelessly to make those dreams come true. And Ethan, for his part, starts to understand the depth of the sacrifices Sophia made to raise Liam alone. Liam, meanwhile, grows increasingly curious about his father. He begins peppering Sophia with questions about Ethan's life before he left, eager to piece together the puzzle of who this man is. Sophia answers as honestly as she can, careful not to paint Ethan in either a wholly positive or negative light. He made mistakes, she tells Liam one evening as they sit together on the couch. Big ones. But people can change, sweetheart. It's up to us to decide whether we believe them when they say they're sorry. Liam absorbs her words thoughtfully, his young mind grappling with concepts far beyond his years. Do you believe him? He asks finally. Sophia hesitates, unsure how to answer. I'm still deciding, she admits. But what matters most is what you think, Liam. This is your decision, not mine. The next day, Liam approaches Ethan outside the community center, where he's helping set up for a charity event. Can I talk to you? He asks shyly, clutching a soccer ball in his arms. Ethan kneels down to meet Liam's gaze, his heart pounding with anticipation. Of course, he says gently. What's on your mind? Liam fidgets with the ball for a moment before blurting out, Why did you leave? The question catches Ethan off guard, though he knows it was inevitable. He takes a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. I left because I thought I could give you and your mom a better life, he begins. I wanted to chase a dream, to build something big, so you'd never have to struggle the way we did. But I was wrong. Leaving didn't fix anything. In fact, it made things worse. Do you regret it? Liam presses, his eyes searching Ethan's face for answers. Every single day, Ethan replies, his voice thick with emotion. I missed out on so much. Your first steps, your first words, birthdays, holiday, everything. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that, if you'll let me. Liam considers this for a moment, then nods slowly. Okay, he says simply. The word feels monumental to Ethan, carrying more weight than any apology or promise ever could. For the first time in years, he allows himself to hope. The turning point comes during the town's annual Harvest Festival, a lively celebration filled with food stalls, live music, and games for children. Sophia reluctantly agrees to let Ethan join her and Liam for the day, though she insists they keep things casual. This isn't a family outing, she warns him beforehand. It's just 3 people spending time together. Nothing more. Ethan nods, accepting her terms without argument. Inside, however, he's nervous. This is the closest thing to a trial run they've had since his return, and he knows it could go either way. The festival is bustling with activity, the air filled with laughter, and the scent of roasted corn and caramel apples. Liam drags them. From booth to booth, his excitement infectious. At one point, he spots a face painting station and begs Sophia to let him get a tiger painted on his cheek. She relents, laughing as the artist transforms his face into a vibrant work of art. Watching them interact, Ethan feels a pang of longing. He wants nothing more than to step into the role of father, to share in these simple joys, but he holds back, reminding himself that earning that privilege will take time. As the sun begins to set, casting golden hues across the park, the trio finds themselves seated on a blanket near the main stage, where a local band is playing soft acoustic tunes. Liam lies sprawled across the blanket, his head resting on Sophia's lap as he munches on cotton candy. Ethan sits a few feet away, close enough to feel included, but far enough to respect the boundaries Sophia has set. For a while they sit in comfortable silence, the music providing a soothing backdrop. Then, out of nowhere, Liam pipes up, "Dad, can you teach me how to play soccer?" The question stuns everyone, including Liam himself. He freezes, realizing what he just said, and looks up at Ethan with wide eyes. I mean, if that's okay. Ethan blinks back tears, overwhelmed by the simple yet profound request. "I'd love to," he says hoarsely, his voice cracking under the weight of emotion. Sophia watches the exchange, her heart swelling with conflicting emotions. On one hand, she's thrilled to see Liam reaching out to Ethan. On the other, she's terrified of what might happen if things fall apart again. Later that night, as they pack up to leave, Sophia pulls Ethan aside. "You're doing good," she admits grudgingly. "But don't think this means we're okay. We've got a long way to go." "I know," Ethan replies earnestly, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Just as things seem to be improving, a shocking revelation threatens to unravel everything. While sorting through old papers at his hotel, Ethan discovers a series of checks made out to Sophia, anonymous. Payments sent monthly since Liam's birth. The signature on the checks matches his own. Confused and angry, he confronts Sophia the next day. "Did you know about this?" he demands, waving the checks in front of her. Sophia pales, caught off guard. "Yes," she admits after a moment, "but I didn't tell you because I didn't want you thinking you owed me, or Liam, anything." "You should have told me," Ethan exclaims, his voice rising. "Do you have any idea how much I struggled with guilt, thinking I abandoned you completely? Knowing I helped, even indirectly, would have changed everything." "I didn't do it for you," Sophia snaps, tears welling up in her eyes. "I did it for Liam, because he deserved to have something from his father, even if it was just money." The argument escalates, culminating in a heated exchange that leaves both of them shaken. For a brief moment, it seems like all progress has been undone. But then Liam intervenes, stepping between them with surprising maturity. "Stop fighting," he shouts, his voice trembling. "I don't care about the money or the past. All I care about is having a family again. Can't you see that?" His words hit home, forcing both Sophia and Ethan to reevaluate their priorities. They agree to put aside their differences for Liam's sake and focus on rebuilding their relationship step by step. Months later, Ethan has fully integrated into their lives. He coaches Liam's soccer team, helps Sophia at the flower shop, and attends parent-teacher conferences with her. Their bond is stronger than ever, built on mutual respect and shared experiences. In the final scene, the 3 of them sit together at a picnic table in the park, laughing as Liam recounts a funny story from school. Ethan glances at Sophia, catching her eye for the first time in years without resentment or bitterness. There's still work to be done, but for now, they're content. As the camera pans out, a narrator's voice reflects, "Sometimes the greatest success isn't measured by wealth or power, but by the connections we nurture and the second chances we embrace." The screen fades to black, leaving viewers with a sense of hope and redemption.